Yo, Toshi here. I have a presentation for you all. We'll be going over all the 5 stars and 4 stars from the CBT3 all the way till the release of the game that received tweaks, nerfs, buffs, adjustments. We'll be going over all the 5 stars and 4 stars that fit that category. There has been some pretty huge nerfs for some characters, some pretty small nerfs for some characters, some pretty massive buffs, even reworks for some of the characters. We'll go over all of that. And yes, I do have a picture of Alicia because I really damn hope that she ends up being a character in Honkai Star Rail. And there you have it, balanced and fair game. I really do think after this balance patch that this game is pretty much a more so balanced and fair game overall. I gotta give Hoyo credit for that. Okay, kick it off with Himeko. Now, we did go over Himeko in the previous video, but all you really need to know for the most part is that she now has burns on all of her attacks. Basic attack, follow-up attack. Think of it like Herta's Kuru attack, right? The spin to win thing. I mean, it is spin to lose, but I mean, spin to win now because we'll get into that. But anyways, Himeko now has burns on her basic, her follow-up attack, her elemental skill, and her ultimate. And each of those attacks have a 50% chance per hit to give a 2-turn burn to the target, which is going to deal a percent of Himeko's damage as damage over time to the enemy. This is a huge change for Himeko because this can stack multiple times. See, what you don't understand is that you can land the basic attack, you can land the follow-up attack, you can land elemental skill, and the ultimate. You can land 4 burns in the same turn. Now, it is a 50% chance to proc each of those burns, and I'm guarantee you that will happen at some points. And some points you probably won't even land any of the burns because it's a 50% chance, right? So if you lose your 50-50s in Honkai Star Rail Genshin Impact, then probably don't play this character. But her best in slot light cone has been buffed slightly. It's very good for devoted mains and light spinners. So if you were picking up Himeko for your rerolls, then you probably want to look towards getting her light cone if you are a light spinner because it will make the character much better overall. And lastly, Himeko's ult multiplier did get slightly increased, which is great, but the energy per kill is sliced in half. So Himeko isn't going to get much more returned energy value after she kills enemies with her ult. So this is going to make it to where you probably want to use her with Tingyun constantly because you want to make sure that you get enough energy to funnel your ult. It's going to be harder to get Himeko's ult after you use it because you won't be getting much in return after you kill enemies. But she's still overall a much better character than she was before. Next up, we have Welt. This character is insane now. So, Sosuke Welt ultimate and talent effect is no longer a damage increase for Welt. So as you all know before, Welt did have a damage increase on his ultimate whenever he triggered the talent effect. But now instead of the damage increase for Welt, it is a team-wide 12% damage increase for everyone on the targets that have the debuff that Welt puts on them from his ult. So the ult debuff that Welt puts on the enemies, whenever it procs, every single ally that attacks that enemy will have a 12% damage increase overall. That is massive. That increases his support capabilities, and he's going to be overall a much better character in your team comps. His elemental skill at Constellation 4 now has a 35 increased base chance to land the slow. That's going to be very massive whenever you take into consideration you probably want to land that slow, right? And for, I would say, whales, you're going to have a 100% chance to land that slow going forward. And free to play, you're still going to have to deal with the RNG, but overall, for a C0 character, he is a much better character overall. And I'm looking forward to having this character on my account in the future. Next up, we have Kafka. So this character received a pretty solid rework. We'll go over everything you really need to know. So first of all, she had a slight increase to her base kit damage, less dot damage with level 10 talent, and this is from her elemental skill. So whenever you use her elemental skill, you're going to be doing less dot damage, but you will have much more damage to her base kit. So I said this in previous videos, the common misconception is that Kafka only does damage with dots. Well, that's not necessarily true. This character does damage with her elemental skill and her ultimate and her basic attack, but she also does dots as a significant damage increase on top of the damage she already does with her base kit. This character is dot focused, but she also does damage with her elemental skills and her ultimate and her basic attack like any normal damage dealer. Her ultimate did get Omega buffed. The dot multiplier on her ult is increased. The lightning dot, which is known as shock, lasts for 3 turns instead of 2. Dot damage enemy receives during ult is now doubled. That is a massive dot damage increase that the enemy will be receiving, which is huge. You're going to be dealing a lot more dot damage with Kafka and with Serval potentially if you use these two characters together. And the ult energy cost did go from 100 to 120, which is a little disappointing, But you know what? You probably want to use this character with Tingyun anyways, because Tingyun will help funnel the energy to this character. But lastly, this character does get energy. So she has a follow-up attack once per turn, which makes the target take 20% more dot damage for 2 turns. That's going to be very massive when you pair her with a character like Serval or any other dot-focused damage carry. Mostly Serval though. She scales with Break Effect, increasing her dot damage via talent, and receives Break Effect stats upon Ascension. This was probably the biggest change to the character overall, aside from the ultimate getting mega buffed. Being able to scale with Break Effect makes it to where she's going to be doing a lot of damage whenever she breaks the enemy's toughness bar, right? And she's going to increase her dot damage with talents, which makes the character much more better, considering that she mostly deals most of her damage with damage over time. And lastly, her constellations were completely reworked, so free to play and low spenders, I really wouldn't go for the characters. I think this, Kafka is an amazing character at C0, and I will say this, you probably should prioritize a new character over a duplicate character, right? Next up, we have Bronya Jr., known as Silver Wolf. I just call her Bronya Jr. because, as you all know, Honkai Impact 3rd, this would pretty much be, Haxer Bunny from Honkai Impact. Alright, anyways, she has an added effect on her elemental skill, which now has a 100% base chance to reduce the resistance of the enemy by 16% for 3 turns. And that resistance decrease is going to be for every single element typing in the game. So fire, wind, light, dark, imaginary, quantum, lightning, and then ice, right? Ultimate energy cost decreased from 120 to 110. That's a pretty huge buff. When you take into consideration, you want to use the character's ult as much as you can. Being able to have a lower energy cost will help the character so much more. I already thought that Silver Wolf was a pretty decent character by looking at the kit, a really strong character at that, but this is going to make the character even better. Now, her talent debuffs did get nerfed, so the debuffs whenever she put on the target had a reduced attack, reduced defense, or reduced speed. Those multipliers went from a 20 to a 15% chance. So overall, that is a slight nerf to the character's base kit, but this character will have the reduced resistance on top of this, so overall, you're still going to be doing much more damage with your allies, while using Silver Wolf as a sub-DPS supporter character. The character now has quantum elemental damage scalings on Ascension stats, which add a lot more damage to the character's kit. Constellations were completely reworked, and as I said before with Kafka, the same thing with Silver Wolf applies. Free to play and light spenders, don't go for dupe characters, go for noob. So new characters over duplicate characters, right? She's a great character at C0. Next up, we have Bronya. Now, this character I was very disappointed to see get nerfed pretty damn hard. Elemental skill damage increase for allies or Bronya from 72 to 66%. So the damage you're going to be dealing on that ally whenever you use the elemental skill from Bronya is going to be decreased by 6%. It's not the end of the world, but every nerf pretty much does hurt the character if you think about it. Can no longer give her self-action forward via elemental skill, so whenever you use elemental skill on Bronya, you will no longer get that action forward push. So whenever you use Bronya's elemental skill on an ally, that ally will then take the turn right after. Well, if you use this skill on Bronya, then Bronya will no longer take the turn after using the elemental skill. Again, I want to cry. That is so disappointing. It takes away the skill expression from the character, in my opinion, and it makes it harder to actually funnel energy to the character. So getting her ult is going to be a lot more harder than it was before, especially with the ult cost nerfs really did hurt the character a lot more than you think, because that synergy is gone and it really kind of ruined the skill expression this character had overall. I am very disappointed. I really wish Hoya would just nerf the multiplier instead of actually nerfing the fact that she can't use the elemental skill on herself to push up her CR. It really does make me disappointed because that's an interaction that is completely removed from the game. If you played Genshin Impact, think of it as the Beidou and Raiden Shogun, situation. I don't think this was a nerf that was warranted. All they had to do was nerf the energy gain, nerf something else, maybe the multiplier furthermore, but still keep the fact that Bronya can use the elemental skill on herself. Anyways, I'm done ranting about that. Yes, her ult cost did get increased to 120 from 110. The attack boost did get nerfed from 60 to 55, which is pretty bad. I mean, these are just, no one likes nerfs, right? So the character is a little worse than she was before, but she is still by far the best character in the game. Now, we'll have to wait and see. Tingyun is still a really good character. that, spoiler alert, didn't really receive any nerfs, but we'll have to wait and see for the release of the game to see how strong Bronya really is going forward. But just know, for free-to-play players, she's going to be a little bit more harder to use in the early game, but the late game, you probably shouldn't struggle with the energy cost, right, when you get your stats built up. Anyways, I'm done with my rant there. I am a little frustrated. Next up, we have Seele, who received pretty massive buffs overall. For free to play, I would say. So her ultimate damage increased from 400 to, which is a 25% multiplier increase on top of the 400 already. That's pretty massive. Doesn't take into consideration her damage from entering buff state via her talent. So Seele does additional damage whenever she enters that buff state via her talent. You enter the buff state before you actually do the ulti damage, which is a part of the ultimate passive, which in turn makes the multiplier not only 425%, but you have to take into consideration the buff state on top of the 425%. So then you have this massive fat multiplier that Seele does to the enemy. Any buff to the ultimate makes the character able to one-shot much more easily and deal more damage overall. So any buff for the character is going to be nice because this character already does so much massive amounts of single target damage. She still has the take turn mechanic that didn't change, so that makes Seele even better whenever you use her in AoE situations, but still, a very amazing single target DPS character. Constellation 1 and 2 was swapped, which is pretty bad for low spenders, especially when you wanted that speed buff for the character, right, for those 2 turns. Being able to have a 50% speed buff would have been very nice for the character. So overall, this is pretty much bait for, free to play and low spenders. I just suggest getting the character C0. She's still amazing. These buffs really do help out her a lot, especially for free play players. Her Constellation 6, so her 6th Constellation was nerfed. Feels bad for the whales, of course, right? And devoted Seele mains. But if you were still looking for a character to max out as a C6 character at some time in the future, Seele is probably your best bet in terms of a DPS character you would want to max out to C6. It did get nerfed, but she's still the strongest damage dealer in the game by far. Next up, we have Gepard. So Gepard, being an ice elemental character, ice elemental shielder at that, has dot damage from his elemental skill. The target now receives slightly more damage from the multiplier. It's a slight increase for Gepard's damage pretty much against ice weakness enemies, which is very nice, right? You put him in a team with Yanqing, and I think those two characters would work pretty well together. His ultimate shield absorption is overall buffed, so it makes it really nice for the early game. Being able to have a stronger shield will allow you to tank more damage, would allow your characters to stay alive, be overall more healthy, and the character has a lot more value. Shields for all allies via this technique, so whenever you use your elemental skill before the start of the battle, you will proc a shield for the whole team with Gepard, and that shield was slightly buffed. So overall, stronger shielder, a much stronger character than he was before, which is very nice considering the character honestly didn't really need any buffs to begin with. He was already a decent character. But this is going to be very nice for any player that was looking to pick up Gepard. Next up, we have Clara, who was my first 5-star. And I'm very sad to say this character got nerfed. I don't know why she got nerfed. So first of all, her damage taken was reduced from 15 to 10%. This was via her ultimate. I don't know why this character got nerfed. It made no sense to me, but she got nerfed, so it is what it is. Her base HP at max levels is now slightly lower. Again, they're reducing the tankiness of Clara, who I don't think really needed a nerf to begin with. All this really does is hurt free-to-play players that use the character, especially in the early game, I would say. So overall, less tanky than before. And of course, me trying to find who asked for this. No one asked for nerfs to Clara. I think all of us can agree that if anything, I think Clara needed a nerf to a buff to the early game. Right? Clara was probably not even one of the best characters in the early game to use. She maybe was better in the late game whenever you had better stats on your character. I don't think Clara even needed nerfs to begin with. This makes no sense to me. Okay, Luocha. This character got a pretty much overall rework. We'll get into it right now. So he's an attack scaling healer. Base stats now increase massively for attack and HP, but he has overall less defense. So putting him with a shooter is going to be nice, although you don't really have to use him necessarily with a shooter. But being able to have base stats increase for his attack makes it to where as an attack scaling healer, he's going to be giving more healing overall to the team. So this is a net positive for the character. So his elemental skill healing value for ally overall buffed from 80 down to 60% attack scaling, while the base value increases from 320 to 800 flat. That is 800 flat healing at max levels. You have to take into consideration, most DPS characters on your team won't even have that much HP. So this character giving 800 flat HP plus a percentage of his attack scaling is pretty massive. You're going to pretty much get your ally to full HP from his elemental skill. This is a massive buff for the character. HP restored via talent, Abyss Flower stacks. This character has a passive. Whenever you reach the max stacks from the Abyss Flowers, healing overall buffed while only needing 2 stacks to reach full stacks, right? For his Abyss Flowers. So this technique you use whenever you use the elemental skill before engaging the enemy, just like you would with any other character, then triggers this talent. So overall, more healing for the team. Luocha cannot be one-shot, kind of like T-Cern from Epic 7 if you're familiar with that character. He now has a 70% chance to resist stun, taunt, provoke, debuffs from the enemy, which is pretty massive when you take into consideration that is a 70% chance to just innately resist any stun, taunt, or provoke debuff from the enemy. Really, really massive buff there. Constellations completely change Welt territory. As I said before, a very nice character as C0, free to play, and light spenders just get 1 copy. Jing Yuan. This character didn't receive many changes because he was already overall a overpowered character, so his technique did get a buff, elemental skill before engaging enemy, hits from his stand, his giant stand, right, the guardian that fights beside him, now 3 turns instead of 2 per action in the first turn, so overall you're going to have more damage at the beginning of the battle. Crit damage for stand increased via Ascension, now 25 instead of 20. Wow, slight buff for Omega strong character. I don't think this character really needed a buff, but he got a buff anyways, and he got a crit damage buff at that, so he's going to overall deal more damage in the beginning of the fight. Yeah, we should have gave the strongest character in the game some buffs. I mean, they did buff Seele, and I didn't really complain, but I don't think this character needed buffs, honestly. And I don't think Seele needed buffs either. But you know what? We'll take all we can get, right? So it seems like the limited characters are going to be much more stronger than the standard banded characters, just from the looks of it. So you probably want to save your currency for limited banner characters and not use your, your premium currency on the standard banner. Just keep that in mind. And a potential of characters that you might like to come into the future, like Luocha, of course. All right, Yanqing. This character did get an overall nerf. I don't think this character needed a nerf per se. I think if anything, he needed a buff because the 50% chance to get the extra attack is kind of RNG. And RNG is never really a good thing. Now, Himeko does have RNG that Yanqing kind of does have also, but Himeko's is multiple attacks. So you will eventually land the RNG. Yanqing, you can go without landing the RNG 3, 4, 5 times in a row, and then you have a huge loss in DPS for the character. Now, the technique for increased damage against targets is now 2 turns instead of 3, and the HP threshold is now 50% of the target's current HP, which has to be higher than Yanqing's max HP to proc it. Yanqing needs as little HP as possible. So at the start of battle, whenever you use your elemental skill on Yanqing, on the enemy, then Yanqing had an increased damage against the enemy, 30% increased damage for Yanqing overall, if that enemy had an HP threshold that was higher than Yanqing's max HP. Now that did get slightly buffed, but you only have 2 turns instead of 3 for the increased damage. But you will get more damage overall because the HP threshold isn't lower. So all you really need to know is that this is going to be a slight buff for the character whenever you use his technique skill. But most characters in the CBT till the release did get buffs for the technique, so every character pretty much got a slight buff for the technique. And the character's constellation did change, but overall a small nerf to lowbrow. Feels bad. But free to play never really cared about constellations, right? Alright, Bailu. Bailu did get healing values for all allies via invigoration, which was a part of her talent, which was healing whenever the ally got attacked by the enemy. So all you really need to know is that Bailu is going to give less healing for each ally via the invigoration. So whenever Bailu used the technique and the battle started, Bailu would then give invigoration to all allies for 2 turns instead of 1, which was the buff, quote unquote. The healing value did decrease, but you have it for 2 turns instead of 1, so it is overall a slight buff for the heals. And what invigoration basically was whenever your ally got attacked that had the invigoration buff, that ally then healed for a percentage of Bailu's max HP, plus a flat amount. Elemental skill and ultimate healing is less in late game, but overall more early. So overall a small nerf to the character's late game, but a nice boost to the character's early game. I will say one thing, if you build this character with a lot of HP, the way I see it is it could be a small nerf to the character or it could be a slight buff to the character for late game. I'm having trouble to picture how much HP your tanks will have when your team comes, such as Clara. I think if you use this character with Clara, this may be a small nerf to characters like Clara who have a lot more HP than characters like, Bailu or Natasha. We'll have to wait and see, but I could be completely wrong in this, and this may be just a slight buff instead of a small nerf. If anything, the character is a little better than she was before, for sure. Trailblaze main character fire version. So shield scale less on defense late game, but overall a buff to the early game. You're going to have strong shields for the early game, but your shields for the late game are going to be less stronger. That's literally it. March 7th. Now we're on to the 4 stars. Pretty sizable nerf to all of our constellations, and each were swapped with one another. So the heal for the ally is now on her C6. Oh man. That is a pretty huge nerf to the character, and that is a huge nerf for free to play. Not saying you won't be able to get her C6, but getting it early on probably will be nearly impossible for a lot of free to play, right? Considering that the constellations were nerfed and swapped around, it is an overall nerf for the character. In my opinion, it was very unwarranted, right? I don't think the character needed nerfs, but they're here regardless, so it is what it is. At least you get one copy for free, right? Alright, so then Heng. Constellation 1 and 6 both were slightly nerfed. Very slightly nerfed. So really nothing changed on the character from the nerfs. Like, it's very slightly nerfed. He's still going to be as strong as he was before. It's almost as if you scratch your head and you're like, why did Hoyo even bother giving him the slight nerf? It made no sense to me. You could argue, well, 3% crit rate, decrease is going to be massive for the character. Come on now, a 3% crit rate decrease, a 2% slow decrease on his elemental skill. Yeah, that sounds like a very sizable nerf to me. These nerfs do nothing to Den Heng. He's still going to be an amazing character for free to play. I don't know why they even bothered to do that. But you know what? It is what it is. I'm not complaining. Arlan. So this character did receive pretty much fat nerfs overall. He's overall a worse character than he was before. It only mattered in the late game how good he would be. For an early game character, he was pretty hard to build because you needed multiple stats and you need to make sure he didn't get one shot or killed. You also need to make sure that you had his talents, his traces, constellations sometimes to make the character much more better. The Constellation 1 and 2 were changed. No longer has the can't consume skill points when I'm guessing via the Constellation. I could be completely wrong in this and I may be reading it wrong, but what it seemed like to me is that he no longer can't consume skill points via the Constellation, which seems like a pretty strong nerf for the character. And his revive is now a ticking time bomb, goes away after 2 turns or after it's being used. The revive isn't really that much of a nerf, but you don't have it indefinitely until you die, right? It's 2 turns after the battle starts or after Arlan takes 2 turns, right? So overall, this character is much worse than he was before. I don't know why he got nerfed. I'm guessing it was only for the late game. But yeah, it's kind of sad to see this character get nerfed. Hopefully he gets some type of tweak before the launch of the game, but it's looking pretty grim, I will say that. All right, Asta. I was so excited for this character. I can't believe she got buffed. She literally did not need any buffs. This character was already insane. The best girl got buffed for literally no reason. The traces were buffed, which means more fire damage for fire characters from 8% to 18% at max levels. That is insane. Massive buff. A very massive buff. Your fire characters are going to be dealing a lot more damage with Asta. Like Himeko, for instance. I was already using Himeko with Asta, and I was dealing massive fire damage on the enemy. When you also use the Trailblaze main character, the fire version, you will be dealing more damage with the Trailblazer character also. I don't know why she received that buff, but hey, any buff to the best girl in the game, right? The enemy now takes more fire damage from Asta from 30 to 50% of Asta's attack. For a character that scaled with attack massively, that also boosted attack for herself and the team, this is overall a pretty nice buff for Asta. So you're going to be doing more damage for her and for the team. It's insane. Her ultimate costs 120 energy instead of 130. Anytime a character receives a decrease in ult cost energy, all you really need to know is that the character will be able to get their ult much more frequently because you have to take into consideration 10 less energy you need to get the ult, which is a huge buff. And I will be making a better Asta guide in the future. Do not watch the one on the channel currently. Just don't, okay? Alright, Herta. The Puppet Master got a couple buffs. Constellation 1 and 2 changed. Herta now deals more damage to targets below 50% HP. Constellation 1 and gains 3% more crit rate every time she crews, up to 5 times Constellation 2. So now you only really need 85% crit rate Also, she is slightly better against bosses because of the 50% below 50% HP damage increase, which was a pretty sizable amount. It went from 20 to 40%, which makes her better against bosses that probably have the ice element weakness, right? But she's overall also a better farmer. So I would say her farming rank would probably be S. I would give it an S because you have to take into consideration the crit rate buff and then the damage increase you have with her basic attacks, which makes her a better farmer overall and a slightly better character against bosses, okay? Slightly better. Overall, the character is still pretty mid, but every buff does help the character, especially considering she's already an amazing farmer. Alright, Serval. Constellation 6 now deals more damage against enemies with lightning damage over times. She's going to be better with Kafka. That's literally it. The character is still amazing as a farmer that you get for free, whose light cone you also get for free, with, gear that you also get for free to put on the character. You're going to have a really strong cracked Serval in the beginning of the game. And she's going to be much better with Kafka, considering Kafka got a huge rework, now does more dot damage focus. Well, Serval is going to be a very nice character to pair with Kafka going forward. So look forward to that. Natasha. Healing overall increased via Constellation 1 and 2. Early game is way more healing than before, while late game is more healing only slightly. So just like Bailu, she had the same slight rework with healing, but she's overall going to be a better healer for early game. I was playing with Natasha in the early game with Clara, but I did notice a lot of the time whenever you did use healing with Natasha, the heal amount you got was very low, considering it scaled more for max HP, but the base healing was pretty low. So a lot of the time, whenever you use your heal on your ally, they were still less than half HP. But with this buff, the character will have much more healing for the ally. And for a lot of players like me that have skill issue, well, this character will be a dream come true. And she's still mommy, right? Okay, Pela. So Pela's orbital skill now reduces ice resistance of the enemy by 12%, 100% chance to land via Constellation 4. So the skill was reworked, but overall buff for Yanqing, Herta, ice damage dealers, and Pela herself. Constellation 6 was nerfed, which is a damage bonus that was halved for Pela, so overall it is a fat nerf for Pela's DPS, but she is a better supporter and less of a damage dealer, which seems like that's the agenda that Hoya was trying to push with the character. So she's going to be a budget Silver Wolf, quote unquote, a very budget Silver Wolf, but if you don't have Silver Wolf, then she'll be a nice character alternatively to use against enemies that have ice weakness, but also a good character to use against bosses in general or with the defense decrease, right? Okay, Shampoo. No buffs for this character's base kit, but indirect buffs from everyone that was buffed by dot damage. So as you all know, Sampo does increase the dot damage the enemy receives, which overall makes the character very nice in a dot-centered team. With the characters that did receive buffs that are buffed via dot damage, he did get indirect buffs from those characters getting much more stronger. Kafka, Serval, and Himeko, so on and so forth. So he's much more of a useful character, so it makes sense why he didn't really receive any buffs to his base kit. His E4 dot damage did take a slight nerf. Whenever the enemy does take immediate damage from Sampo's dots on the enemy, they take 2% less damage overall, which is a slight nerf, but take into consideration all the characters that did get buffed that do dot damage, and he's going to be a much better character overall, so it makes sense why he got nerfed. And this E6 did get giga buffed. The enemies take more wind dot damage from Sampo, overall from 10% to 15% via his talent. So the character is a much better character than he was before because of the other characters in the game getting buffs that do dot damage, and Shampoo also getting a buff of his own via his E6, which is going to be a very nice, goal for free to play to hit in the future. Okay, Hook. I still don't know the gender of this character, but let's go on with what changed about Hook. So overall nerfs for the character, Constellation 1 now deals less damage for Hook's enhanced skills from 40 to 20%. So you're going to be dealing less damage with Hook overall. Hook's elemental skill did a lot of damage, I'm going to be honest. Hook did a lot of single target damage. I used Hook with Himeko. I used Hook with Asta. Hook was pretty strong in the CBT3. I don't think the tier list was kind of, good of showing how strong the character was, but I do see why they got nerfed a little bit. Now the E4 did get, or the Constellation 4 wording was kind of wonky. It seems like it's overall a nerf, or it could be straight up that the wording of the skill changed and that's pretty much all there was to it and not an actual nerf. But overall the character is worse than the character was before. Let's just say that. Feels bad to hook. Okay, Qingque. First of all, this character is very, very weird. I don't know how this character works to this day still, and I'm too lazy to figure out how this character works. But all you really need to know is that Constellation 4 was slightly nerfed, but now Constellation 6 gives a free skill point whenever you activate her Constellation 4. So whenever you get this character maxed out as C6, you're going to have a strong 4-star character because you have the chance of getting a free skill point whenever you activate the Constellation 4 passive. It does have a 24% chance to activate, which is a 1/4 chance. So overall, this character is still a big gamble. If you're having a very lucky day, let's say you win all of your 50/50s on that day, then you probably want to play this character because you will essentially have won the lottery, right? This is the character for you if you are a gambler or having a good day. I am not a gambler, although I have a gambling addiction. I should not be saying that live on camera in front of you all. But this character, I definitely will make a guide on someday and try to figure out how this character works because she does have a pretty cool looking design, especially with the kind of gambling aspect she has in her kit, and with the overall aesthetic of the character, and with her being a character you get for free. I mean, why wouldn't you want to build her, right? She could be a fun character to use at some point. So we'll definitely take a look at this character in the future, but all you need to know is that this character is buffed from where she was before. So the free skill point is no joke. She is definitely a better character. Tingyun. Her E4 got nerfed. Instead of 10 energy, you get 5 energy per kill for the ally with her elemental skill buff. And this is only once per turn. So you no longer get 10 energy per kill per turn. You get 5 energy per kill per turn. Wow. That is a very strong nerf, guys. She's still a giga broken fox waifu. It's so funny how this character gets a slap on the wrist, but Bronya gets pretty massive nerfs. It's very funny. I don't understand why this character is still as strong as she is. I don't understand why they took away Bronya's E-skill interaction for herself, but then gave this character a slap on the wrist. Now you might be all saying, well, Toshi, you're looking at it wrong. The 10 energy to 5 energy is a massive nerf. 10 energy to 5 energy isn't going to really make or break the character. She already gives a lot of energy with her ultimate. You already don't really need much energy considering the fact that she gives a lot of energy with her ultimate. And if you use Bronya's light cone best in slot on this character, then you still give a lot of energy to the ally and the chance to give that ally a skill point. This character needs a better nerf. I'm sorry guys, but I'm just going to say it. This character needs a better nerf. There's no reason why this character should be as strong as she is. This is literally a Bennett situation all over again. In fact, I'll go as far as to say, this character is better than Bennett. She is a battery, she's a damage buffer, she's an attack buffer, she also does additional damage with the ally character. What the hell, man? This character needs a nerf. Give this character a freaking nerf. I don't know why she's still as strong as she is, and I don't know why Bronya is worse than she was before. While this character gets a slap on the wrist, man, it just doesn't make any sense. Give Bronya back her E interaction where she can buff up her CR, and I'll be happy. I don't know why that character received that nerf. If anything, all the character really need was a nerf to her energy gain. That's all they had to do. But instead, what they wanted to do was make the character worse, make her light cone better, so that you end up getting the light cone for the character to make the character much more better. Aside from Daya, I gotta give credit. The Daya thing was a lot more worse than this. But come on, man. I don't understand I'm in the creator program, quote unquote. But dude, this is so disappointing, man. Give Bronya back the nerf that she did not need to her elemental skill. Instead, all they had to do was change the amount of energy she got from it, and everything will be much better. I don't know why the character received that nerf. Oh my god. Bronya's constellation really strong, but Tingyun's constellations are also really strong, while also being a very strong character C0. There's no reason why a 4-star should be nearly as strong, maybe better in some situations, than a freaking 5-star. It doesn't make any sense. This character needs a freaking nerf. Oh my god. And lastly, we have Sushang. Character 4 break value, Sushang, effect value, right? So whenever you break the enemy's toughness bar, then you deal additional damage. And that damage was decreased from 50 to 40%, which is a slap on the wrist. This is a still very strong Omega broken 4-star character. And twin tails are cute. Just like any other twin tail character, like, Qingque, so on and so forth. Anyways, that's going to be all the characters here. Overall, a lot of characters did receive a bunch of nerfs. So some characters received a bunch of buffs, like Luocha. Overall, Luocha is probably going to be a better healer for your account than a character like Bailu, because limited characters are going to be better than 5-star default characters in this game, except for Bronya. But I'm still very disappointed with the Bronya nerfs. I don't think the Bronya needed the nerf she got. It just ruins a lot of skill expression that the game already lacked in the first place. Well, we would have eventually found out the interaction, and it would have been some cool tech we could have found out with Bronya. But now that the tech is no longer there, it ruins the skill expression that the character had before, because we would have found it eventually that you can do that interaction. And the very second thing is the fact of the matter is that they nerfed the character and they made her best in slot light cone better. I'm just so disappointed. I'm probably going to go and cry in bed after this video. But anyways, thank you all for watching. Hope you got something out of this. And I'll see you all at the launch of Honkai Star Rail. Peace.